We are getting close to the end of this course, and I hope you've learned a lot about multinational management and about the concept of business becoming more globalized. We've talked about a lot of different topics. We've heard from a lot of great guest speakers, and I thought it would be nice to have as our final guest speaker somebody who could tie everything together. So, Miss Ashley Daigle, she will be our last guest speaker. She has been at the same company for 20 years. So, she has a lot of wonderful experience doing a lot of the things that we've talked about, dealing with a lot of that stuff, plus a lot more. So she is going to relate it to a, how does this happen at my company standpoint? She is going to cover topics such as billing requirements and compliance. And in that, she'll talk about country specific requirements like language, currency, electronic invoicing mandates that might be different across the world. She will talk about tax complexities and some of the different tax regimes and deadlines and all the resources that she utilizes doing the tax work. She will talk about risk management, including things like audits, fraud prevention, and managing different currencies and foreign exchange rates. She'll talk about adapting to diversity in the workplace, things like language barriers, time zone differences, cultural awareness. So some of these topics should sound very familiar to you. We've talked about them through the semester. Some of them will be new. Some of them might not be things that you work with in your present job or even in a future job. But it's very helpful for you to understand what happens at a large company like this when they have so much international business. So let's welcome Miss Ashley Daigle as our final guest speaker.
Hello, my name's Ashley Daigle. I work for Oceaneering International. I'm the Cash Hemisphere Manager for Western Hemisphere. I've been with the company now 20 years. In May, I'll make 20 years. So Oceaneering, it was founded in 1964. They've been in business for right over 60 years now. It started out as a small diving company called Worldwide Divers right here in Morgan City, Louisiana. And then in 1969, it merged with two other diving companies, and that's when it formed Oceaneering. Now they're a leading global provider of many engineered products and services, operating in over 70 countries. From sea to space is what we typically say, because from sea we have remote operated vehicles, which you can see behind me, where we can see under the water, the seabed, and operating that from a remote location above water. And then we offer many other oilfield services, theme park services, such as the exhibit in Universal Studios, the Jaws exhibit. That's one of the exhibits that our team supported. Many aerospace and defense industries, so working with NASA and many government agencies as well. So it's a really interesting and exciting company to work for. So just a little bit about my journey here at Oceaneering. I started pretty early on with a global reach, working with a lot of my colleagues across our different nations, specifically starting in accounts receivable. I started as a junior accountant. I mean, at that time, we were moving to a new ERP, so they needed my help reconciling some accounts, applying cash for payments that we received from customers for multiple entities across the globe. So I started working with colleagues across in different locations there. I then moved to like intercompany accounting. So when we did transactions across our different entities or subsidiaries, reconciling those accounts and working with our counterparts in those locations. And then also asset management. I worked with our teams when we would transfer equipment from one entity, let's say in the US, to work in Aberdeen. Then we would transfer equipment, have intercompany transactions associated with that. So worked with many of our different teams doing that work as well, which led me to now as the Cash Hemisphere Manager, primarily responsible for our teams billing our customers, so understanding our contracts. When we do have those services and products, knowing what our contracts are and billing our customers, receiving the payment for that and applying the cash. So currently responsible, like I said, for Western Hemisphere. So I have a team in Brazil. And then also that does like our local collaborating with our project managers and things like that. But we also have a team in India where they do the transactional side of the billing. So we coordinate and get all the details and things, and then we pass that on to our team in India, and they do the transactional side of it. So with that, I'm gonna just focus on 3 areas that I primarily deal with when it comes to managing, these cross teams and other locations. Those areas are our billing requirements and compliance, risk management, and adapting to diversity in the workplace. So first, with billing requirements and compliance, we not only have to think about like how do we adhere to our customer requirements and maybe oceaneering requirements and things like that, but we also have to consider country-specific requirements. So, some countries, they may have a different language that they require. So like Israel, for instance, they require not just English on the invoice, but we also have to translate that to Hebrew. So that's a mandatory requirement. So we need to understand what those requirements are. Currency is another one. We may contract in US dollars with our customer, but then for the local requirements, we then have to receive that in Angola kwanzas, for instance. Also, some locations may require company seal, invoice numbering, certain bank accounts to be local bank accounts and that sort of thing. So it's really important whenever you're working with a new location to understand what those local requirements are. We also deal with evolving e-mandates, e-invoicing mandates. It's a big kind of up and coming thing, especially overseas, in our overseas Eastern Hemisphere area, is where we're having to invoice electronically. So it's not just a thing now to like send an invoice, a hard copy by email or through a portal. We also have to electronically submit data to these government portals. That's a mandate. So it's really important to understand what those mandates are to keep access to the local resources and notifications whenever things change, that you're aware. Sometimes it's a quick deadline, so you have to really amp up your technological or coordinate things quick to make sure we're in compliance. Don't wait too long, because if it's a mandate and you don't follow that deadline, then you can be subject to penalties and interest and that sort of thing. It's also important to standardize and centralize your financial reporting. So finding that right balance between global standardization and local customization is critical, because you want to have standardization in process and things like that, but you have to take into account that there are local differences. So keeping what we have is on our main site, we just have what our standard SOPs are, and then we have like what the differences are for those different locations and regions, and we just make sure that there's as much standardization as we can have. So the next point is tax complexities. So adherence to all tax regimes and updates is a critical thing as well. So there's so many taxes. There's VAT tax, sales tax, HST tax, withholding tax. Brazil is one of our most complex tax regimes that we have as well. So when we're working in a country or even a new country, it's critical to understand that up front to set the framework, as opposed to awaiting, let's say, an audit and it becomes a lesson learned, because that's happened as well. So setting up that framework from the start to say, hey, what are our tax? What do we need to know about the tax in this particular country? And making sure our data is consistent in reporting and our accuracy. And like I stated before, it's important to have access to the notifications as things change. Our tax in a certain area change, that we stay up to date with those notifications so we can change our processes. it's important to also know with tax what our compliance and deadlines are, so we can have fines and penalties for non-compliance or failing to report by deadlines. Some are pretty frequent, like in Guyana, we have to report it every month. In Trinidad, we have to do it bi-weekly. So understanding what our deadlines are, not just to invoice, but also to collect and report our taxes on the timeline that's specified, and to report that tax money to the authorities to avoid any fines and penalties. A big part of making sure we're compliant and regulations is having support resources. So we want to make sure we have local regional support, subject matter experts, so we can't expect to know everything in every country. So we definitely utilize our in-house tax team, as well as we have external tax support. So we'll have maybe PwC or EY, different consultants that assist us, as well as have just maybe within our own team, we have local support. Like in Brazil, we may have a local person that works for Oceaneering that's also can help us with things. Again, as part of the resources, having documented standard operating procedures, making sure that we don't just think we know what we're doing, we know what we're supposed to do. So well-structured global process framework can help us reduce those inefficiencies. Regular training and process audits to ensure a deep understanding of processes and regional nuances. So we do normal and maybe annual checks of our processes. If we haven't updated it throughout the year, we'll make sure, hey, is this still up to date? Check with maybe our resources, see if anything's changed, if we haven't been notified of anything, just to keep making sure that we're following the criteria. Also, use of advanced technology. So making sure we're looking at digital transformation, what can make us more efficient, use of RPA opportunities to boost efficiency where processes are repetitive and mundane. We put some of that into place, and it helps the team focus on more value-added tasks, as opposed to maybe working on things that we can teach the bot to do. So the next topic is a big one. It's risk management. So that's a big thing when you work in multiple countries, is managing the risk. First big one is audits. Obviously, we're subject to many audits, and the big one for us is adhering to SOX compliance. So what is SOX? If you haven't heard of it, that's the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and this was something that came into play early in the 2000s when there was a lot of corporate scandals, financial deficiencies that were caught. So it's primarily for companies that are registered in the U.S. Security Exchange Commission. However, if you have subsidiaries in other countries and they're part of this U.S. company, then they're also liable for it. So we may have sometimes, employees overseas that worked for, a country-specific company that's not linked to the U.S., not have to adhere to SOX, and then they come to Oceaneering and like, what is this and why do we have to follow this? And that's because if you're working, like I said, with a U.S. company and they're registered in the U.S., if you're a subsidiary, then you're also have to comply to that. So it's a lot of training and making sure that our controls, which basically is SOX control, is say what you're going to do and then do what you say. So putting controls to prevent fraud and things of that sort of thing, misreporting of financial information, setting those controls and then following it. So making sure the team across the different regions are all trained on what those controls are, and we're following them, and passing those audits. We're also subject to local compliance audits. So different countries can come, their government can come and request documentation and make sure that we're adhering to their regulations and guidelines. So, we may think we're doing something right, and then we get an audit, and then they tell us that, hey, this isn't compliant with what we require, and then we could be subject to penalties and fines for that. So that's why it's important to get that correct up front and make sure the teams are following the right protocols. Another big topic for managing risk is fraud. Especially working with multiple countries, it's a big risk for us. So with us billing customers and getting paid, big thing is bank accounts. So something we've dealt with is maybe a customer, our emails from us getting intercepted and then notifying the customer with a similar email, but maybe a little different, that we've changed our bank details. So one thing is we try to make sure our customers are aware of what our customer contact by phone numbers are, and to make sure if there's any change in bank account that they get that either in our contract updated or over the phone directly with the contact information that's in our contract to avoid that sort of thing. Also, when we maybe give refunds to our customers, we'll do the same. We'll make sure that we're contacting that customer and we're verifying that account information over phone to ensure that we have the correct information. Another part of risk management is different currencies and foreign exchange rates. So for contracts, we need to make sure that we're pricing products and services in the optimal currency to avoid loss from currency deflation. So we know we may have a history of what that deflation is, and some currencies are of higher value than others, so keeping that in mind. But there's also the risk of unforeseen events. So sudden shifts in the rates due to political instability or economic crisis, that sort of thing, can also lead to significant financial consequence. So while some of it you may be able to predict, some of it is unforeseen, and you still have that risk of things changing on you. Also, with our billing and our payments, it's often we bill in one currency. We might have to receive the cash in another. This kind of goes back to those local requirements for the country. So just being aware of that situation, and if there is that possibility for that currency to exchange and fluctuate, you want to make sure that's included in your contract pricing as well. So the next topic we'll talk about is adapting to diversity in the workplace. So this is one, obviously, managing multinational comes into play quite a bit, and it started, like I said, early on in my career, working with multiple colleagues across the globe. But the biggest one would obviously be your language barriers and finding solutions to work around that. In many cases, English won't be the first language. If obviously we speak English, but it might not be, first language for others. So it's really important to have open communication. Ask what helps. When I first started having a direct report in Brazil, she spoke Portuguese, and only 1% of the people in Brazil speak English. So even if they're learning English, if they're not speaking it fluently or regularly, it's really difficult for them to kind of keep it in practice. So I made sure to have regular calls so that way we could practice and just ask, what's helpful for her. Seeing me on video and looking at how I say it sometimes was helpful. Making sure I slow down, speak slow, was easier for her as well. Sometimes I can notice she was a little confused, and I would, try to say it slower or just type it. Sometimes it's easier for them to just read it than actually hear it or see it, because different accents make it harder than others. So I would just type it. It's just working around and being very patient. I type it in our chat, and she's like, "Oh, okay, I understand." So reading it for them too is easier than sometimes hearing it. So being very patient and making sure we're empathetic, because it's not easy learning a second language. So that's something that you have to be patient with. Utilization of technology to facilitate those translations. So Google Translate, you can have apps on your phone and things like that, or through Teams we can type things and they can translate it. So that makes it helpful to, if there is that communication barrier, that it can assist with that. But promoting open communication across teams to enhance collaboration and minimize misunderstandings. is important. So making sure the team is aware of that and you're working together and encouraging that collaboration, being patient and getting that feedback from all the teams is going to be good in the end. The time zone limitations and awareness. So that's a big one, especially when like our team that does our billing is 10.5 hours difference. Being respectful, a lot of them do work some on our similar time zones because they've been hard to work on our time zones, but just having that awareness when you're talking to someone in Brazil versus Aberdeen versus India versus Dubai, what is their time zone? Is it a time when they're working or, they're off, and trying not to maybe send messages, especially as a leader, if you send something, they think they have to respond right away. So I try to be mindful and not always respond if it's outside their working hours. I'll send it in and maybe put the time to send it at a date when I know they're working, or a time whenever they're working, so it's within their working hours. But sometimes when you have it on your mind and you want to send it now, you can manage when it gets sent, so that they can get it during their working hours. Then respecting diverse cultures. So culture awareness training is a good way to, you can work with your HR team to facilitate that, but it's good just when you're working with a team in different cultures, just to understand, because it can be different than what we're used to. If you're making office visits, researching ahead of time, what are the things maybe conforming to local dress and conduct. When I visited India for the first time, I did this. I went online, I researched ahead of time, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna, the thing to do is to dress modest, closed-toe shoes, that sort of thing. And then when I showed up and everybody had, open-toe shoes and they were dressed in dresses, and I realized, well, that's more of the traditional view. So what I probably could have done better was talk to maybe colleagues that have already been to India and just kind of confirmed what that is. So lesson learned for me. I'll kind of double check with, someone that maybe works in the office that I have a good rapport with, or someone that's already visited and they know the proper things to do. But even like openness to trying local foods and cultures. Again, in India, they get very excited when you want to try their food, or, they like to dance. We had a party and they teach you how to dance, really makes them feel inclusive, and it gives you a good opportunity to engage and build that rapport with them as well. Also, just simple things like acknowledging holidays. So we tend to have like a global calendar on our group, and we have all the different holidays. And everywhere where our team works, we make sure we put holidays, and we try to make sure we're acknowledging those holidays, or even being respectful of time off because of holidays on their calendars. So it's a good way to just have that awareness and connect with the teams in that way. So another part of the diverse is roles and salary alignment. So one thing we have to be aware of is that roles, especially in a place where we want to standardize things, it's hard to do that when you have all these different regions, because roles and hierarchy are going to vary for different labor markets. So a supervisor maybe in the US might not have the same credit and merit as a supervisor in the Brazil region or in the India region. They might not even have what's called a supervisor in India region. It's called something else. So you just got to adjust and kind of be aware of those differences, working with your HR team. So what those differences are and how we can align, standardizing as much as we can, but then align to local markets to meet those same guidelines. And then salaries and benefits, obviously the same thing there. You're going to have similar job titles or tasks that are being performed, but maybe they have different titles. And then their pay will be different too, and benefits. Some benefits will be included in one and not included in other, and that's just based, again, on local labor market values and regulations. So it's important, again, to just understand the countries that your team's working in, working with HR, and just being aware as much as possible of what those differences are as a manager, so you can better assist them and have that awareness. So that's the three topics that I wanted to talk about. Again, is the billing requirements and compliance, and all the different reporting that we have to adhere to, the risk management, the audits, frauds, and different currencies, and then adapting to the diversity in the workplace. So, understanding our communication limits, respecting those cultures, and the roles and salary alignments. In today's rapidly evolving and interconnected world, overcoming these global management complexities and process challenges are vital for companies to stay competitive and deliver more value to its stakeholders. Embracing a focus of continued improvement, not only in yourself, but also encouraging it with your team, fosters a proactive mindset. Having this diverse team brings different perspectives and can fuel great ideas for enhancement. So always keep an open mind. The more diversity you have, the more you come together and come up with the best solutions. While managing multi-nations can be complex, it's also very personal, rewarding. It cultivates many diverse connections and outlooks, as well as fosters a broader perspective, not only in the workplace, but in life in general. So thank you for listening today. Wishing you all the best in your future career endeavors. May it be filled with growth, fulfillment, and lasting success.